Keeping up with the Nation's Hit Serial podcast, you would know that these three plays that you just saw played a large factor in the conviction of Adnan Syed, who was found guilty of murdering Hae Min Lee, his girlfriend at the time, whom both studied together at Woodlawn High School. These three places, the Woodlawn Public Library, Leakin Park, and the Best Buy, all served a very important role as Adnan Syed could not remember where he was on the day Hae disappeared on January 13, 1999. But there were other verdicts given in the podcast that allowed for the conviction and this new upbringing of this story to come back to life. So we're going to dive into the first place, and let's hear from Sarah Koenig, the host of the podcast, who speaks with Asia, who recalls Adnan being at the Woodlawn Public Library on the day of Hae's disappearance.
I was never questioned. I was never informed of anything pertaining to the case. I don't know why he was convicted.
Asia said she was spooked when the private investigator came to her house. I don't know if that's why she didn't testify at the hearing or why she made the call to the prosecutor, but she told me that when she got the knock at the door, quote, that was not cool. Because to her, if Adnan did do it, quote, the last thing you want is a murderer being pissed off at you, knowing where you live. But she had a remarkably clear memory of what happened on January 13th, 1999. She had an internship at the time, and so she got out of school much earlier than everyone else. Derek was supposed to come get her at the library, along with Gerard, but they were very late. She remembers seeing Adnan come in after Woodlawn let out for the day.
Adnan came in, he sat at the table, and, we weren't, really close friends or anything like that, but, we knew each other, and, he chatted or whatever, and I can't remember. I think I must have asked him how he was doing or whatever, and he said fine, and, he told me that him and Hae had broke up, and I was like, oh, well, that's a bummer, and I was like, what happened? And he was like, oh, well, she was seeing this other guy, some white dude, and, but he was pretty chill about it. He was just like, well, if, she doesn't want to be with me, then that's fine. I just wish the best for her, and that kind of attitude. And
I'm not sure why Asia's memory of this interaction is so clear all these years later. My best guess is that because she wrote it down at the time, in those letters and then the affidavit, that the details somehow stuck. Do you remember what time you were talking this would have happened in the library? Do you remember what time that conversation would have happened?
I don't, because I know school let out around 2:15, so it was probably around 2:30.
Because you had said you got out of school earlier than other people. So were you there? Were you at the library before 2:15?
Oh, yeah. I had been at the library for a few hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I was pretty pissed when Derek showed up. And he asked me who Adnan was, and, jealous teenager boy language. He's like, who the hell is that? Mm-hmm. And I said, don't even start with me, because you're a few hours late. Don't worry about who that is, I remember that day because that was the day that it snowed.
Were there snow days after that? Do you remember?
I want to say there was, because I think that was like the first snow of the year. Mm-hmm. I wouldn't have even remembered if it hadn't have been for the snow and the whole, I just remember being so pissed about Derek being late and then getting snowed in at his house, and it was the first snow of that year.
The snow is important. Hae disappeared on a Wednesday. That night there was a huge ice storm, which is unusual in Maryland. It ended up being a state emergency, and school was closed for the rest of the week. Asia started asking me questions about the case. Wasn't there DNA evidence? And what exactly was Jay's part in the whole thing?
Earlier, Adnan could not remember where he was on January 13, 1999, when Hae had disappeared. In speaking with Asia, Sarah Koenig reveals that he was actually with her at the Woodlawn Public Library discussing the issue of breaking up with Hae. Many believe that this rough past relationship and the differences in family and culture actually led Adnan to killing her. Moving on to the next scene, the Best Buy. In episode 5 of Serial, We find out that Adnan actually met with Jawan to make a phone call at a payphone near the Best Buy in the Woodlawn area. Let's hear what Sarah Koenig has to say about this.
Particular part of the parking lot, alas, it has significance. After Adnan was arrested, the detectives interviewed another friend of his, a kid named Jawan. And Jawan told them he'd gotten high with Adnan once, in Adnan's car. Here's tape of that interview.
And where was this?
Best Buy parking lot.
Why did you go to Best Buy parking lot?
Nobody would be over there.
Was it your choice to go there? His choice.
He said that's where him and Hayes to go to spend time together.
Adnan and Hay would go there to spend time.
Did he say what they would do there when they were on the parking lot alone, knowing that no one comes to that side of the parking lot?
I think he might have said that they had sex there before.
In case you didn't hear that, he says, I think he might have said that they had sex there before. Yeah. Jawan said this happened, this trip to get high at Best Buy, that it happened after Hay went missing. Meaning, if Adnan did it, he was taking Jawan back to the exact spot where he killed Hay. He was returning to the scene of the crime. Jawan says that they parked, from the sounds of it, right where Jay says Hay's car was that day, right where Dana and I are now also parked. It takes Dana and me 18 minutes to get to this spot. That leaves 3 minutes for the actual horror of the thing. An argument maybe, then strangulation. Then he's got to put her body in the trunk, somehow without anyone seeing. Granted, this part of the parking lot is pretty empty, but it's a parking lot in the middle of the afternoon. There are definitely cars and people near enough to make this seem like a very, very risky move. I-70 Park and Ride, where Jay says they leave Hay's car for a few hours. It's just a large commuter parking lot. Jay says he follows Adnan there. Adnan is driving Hay's car. Jay has Adnan's car. He's pretty careful to let the cops know. He wasn't ever in Hay's car, never touched her or her stuff.
Did he get out of the car?
Yes, he got out of the car and
This is from Jay's second taped statement.
proceeded to go through the trunk and the back seat.
This detail has always struck me, by the way. Jay says Adnan is going through the trunk of Hay's car at the I-70 Park and Ride. Hay's body is back there, in the trunk at this point. But anyway.
Several items he picked up and moved around and stuff like that. And then he came over to his car, told me to pop the trunk. I popped the trunk. He placed a whole bunch of items in the trunk. And then he got in the driver's seat, and we switched places, and I got in the passenger seat.
Jay's story doesn't line up with the cell phone records. And the timeline he's giving is also not lining up with the times of the cell phone calls.
As you can see, the story stuff is starting to become a bit questionable, and the testimony from Jay differs from that of Asia and Adnan. Asia believes that he was with her at the Woodlawn Public Library, but Jay insists that he was with him making a call to payphone after he had murdered Hay. As you can see, the question of memory becomes a very, very large issue, because everyone has recollections of the event, but they all differ from one another. The last place I'm going to talk about is Lincoln Park, where I'm standing at right now, where Hay's body was discovered almost 300 yards into the park. The question becomes, why did someone have to go so far, and who would go so far in? Was it Adnan or was it someone else? The last section we're going to explore, Sarah Koenig talks about the death of Hae-Min Lee and where her body was found in Lincoln Park. Let's take a listen.
And they talk to Adnan's track coach to check Adnan's alibi. And it's inconclusive. The coach tells them he can't be sure Adnan practiced that day. They don't take attendance. On February 6th, they do that awful, foreboding thing you see on TV sometimes. They take a team of dogs to check the wooded areas and fields around Woodlawn High School. They used Hay's curling iron for a scent. On February 8th, they make a report saying they're going to check Hay's computer, her AOL account, for clues. And then, on February 9th, their search stops, and a new suspect emerges.
Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3.
This is tape from a police interview of the man who finds Hay. He's a little hard to hear on the tape. He's soft-spoken. I'm going to call this man Mr. S. I don't want to use his full name for reasons I promise will become clear. Mr. S. works in the maintenance department at a local school.
I think I may have discovered a body in Lincoln Park.
I think I may have discovered a body in Lincoln Park, he says. Before I get to the slightly off-kilter story about how Mr. S. discovered this body, just a word here about Lincoln Park. It's actually spelled Leakin Park, L-E-A-K-I-N, but almost everyone in Baltimore pronounces it Lincoln Park. It's huge, over 1,000 acres, on the western edge of Baltimore City. It's got a reputation, and not for the beauty of its woods or its trails or its nature center. What it's known for, sadly, is dead bodies. Mention Lincoln Park to people from Baltimore, as I often did, and you're pretty much guaranteed to get a comment like this.
While you're digging in Lincoln Park to bury your body, you're going to find somebody else's. That's Lincoln Park.
When I told the rental car guy in West Baltimore I was working on a story about a girl who was found in Lincoln Park, he said, "Oh yeah? My uncle was found dead in Lincoln Park." A macabre website dedicated to Baltimore murders lists 68 bodies found there since 1946, though the list is missing at least 7 years of stats, so that number is probably low. A lot of law-abiding Baltimoreans, they don't even really know where Lincoln Park is. Rabia Chowdhury, that family friend of Adnan's who first contacted me about this case, when she was explaining it to me, she said, "Yeah, and how is Adnan supposed to get to Lincoln Park so fast? It's like an hour into the city."
Lincoln Park is nowhere near the school.
Her brother, Saad, Adnan's best friend, he didn't know anything about Lincoln Park either.
After Adnan had initially got arrested, when I was on the phone with him talking, like, when he was locked up, I was like, Lincoln Park, I'm like, where is that? Do you even know where it is? Have you ever been there? And he's like, I have never been there. I don't even know where it is. So, I mean, living around here, we don't know, but it's somewhere in the inner city.
Where Hay was found is, in fact, for a lot of people, that alone made Adnan look innocent. Like, what's a nice boy like you doing in a park like this?
And I walked around through the bushes and everything.
So now, Mr. S., he also told the cops he'd never been to that part of Lincoln Park before, though he did seem to know that people go fishing back there. Here's what he told the cops. At his job, he'd gotten a work order to shave down a door. But the school didn't have the tool he needed, a plane. He had one at home, though. So during his lunch hour, he said he drove his truck home, got the plane from his basement, and before he left, grabbed some sustenance out of the fridge.
I grabbed the beer out of my refrigerator. It was a 22-ounce Budweiser. And I was drinking on my way back to school where I work at. And I had to go to the bathroom, so I pulled over. And I went further in the woods so no one would see me urinating. And when I discovered what looked like was a body in the woods.
So he's drinking this 22-ounce Budweiser, and he's heading back to work, and his route to the college is through Lincoln Park. And suddenly he has to pee, badly, he says. He stops on Franklin Town Road. He's about 3 miles from work. There's a small pull-off and some concrete barriers, and he walks back in there. Quite a ways, it seems like, for a guy who just has to pee. Later they'd measure. 127 feet back into the woods is where he goes. This next tape is a little upsetting.
And I got back that way. I was getting ready to urinate. When I looked down, I seen something look like hair. Something was covered under dirt. And I looked real good again. And until I seen what looked like a foot.
What drew your attention to the area that you went to? There was something there.
It was an open area.
An open area? Mm-hmm. Okay. But there was also a fallen tree, is that correct?
Yes, it was.
All right. I mean, did you go to that area for a certain reason?
No.
No?
No.
All right.
Fallen tree, essentially a 40-foot log, lying more or less parallel to the road. On the other side of the log, if you'd kept going, you'd have gotten to a stream with the unfortunate name of Dead Run. Hay's body was buried right behind this log on the stream side. If you were standing on the street side of the log, so on the other side, it's not at all obvious that you'd notice her. So his story about why he stopped where he stopped, it doesn't quite seem right. Here's Bill Ritz.
When you're walking back to this area where you finally stop, why did you pick that particular area?
Well, as I didn't pick that area. I was going to go back further, except for that's when I seen, the hair, and I seen that foot. That's when I left out.
You said you were going to actually go back further?
Yes.
In this part of the tape, you get a sense of how Ritz and McGillivray operate together, or at least what I've gathered from listening to a bunch of these interviews. McGillivray starts out, all non-judgmental. Just tell me your story. Then Ritz comes in and says something like, just help me understand here, and asks some harder questions, exposing weaknesses in the narrative. Then McGillivray will come back in, but now it's a tougher McGillivray, and he's asking direct, sometimes harsh questions that seem like they'd be good at pushing someone off balance. Like this one, sort of out of the blue.
Have you ever been inside that girl's car before?
Oh, no.
Never.
Back to the fallen tree. Here Ritz is saying, wait, I thought you told McGillivray you stopped at the log to pee, but now you're saying you were on your way farther back?
Stop there, you said before that you were getting ready to urinate. And then that's when you looked down and discovered the hair.
Yes.
And now you're saying you're going to actually go back further?
Well, before I discovered it.
Before you discovered it. Maybe I'm a little bit confused. As you're standing on the south side of the tree, between a tree and the road...
This doesn't ever get cleared up, really, and they sort of let it go. But a bunch of things are fishy. The path he takes back into the woods, it doesn't really lead to the log. So why does he end up there? He didn't need to head toward the log to find a hidden spot to pee. There are so many other choices. And if you're walking through brush and brambles, wouldn't you sort of naturally avoid a big log you'd need to step over? What they're trying to get at is, did you really just stumble on this body, or were you looking for this body because you already knew where it was? That is a reasonable question, because Hayes' body wasn't just hard to spot. It was nearly impossible to...
While watching this video, we discovered that everyone has a different memory of the event, and they link their memory with a certain place. We learned that memory serves as a trigger for this event, and it isn't always reliable. And in this case, it is so severe that some innocent man could be locked up for the rest of his life for doing a murder that he did not even commit. In closing, I'm going to say one thing. Free Adnan Syed.